Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine a leader in, well, one of the world's oldest institutions, right?
Hmm.
Someone who started out, quite humbly, far away, but then rises to become this global figure,
Right.
really shaping the church today.
Yeah,
We're talking about Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle, a really well-respected and, frankly, influential leader in the Catholic Church.
absolutely.
So our mission for this deep dive, explore his story, his kind of unique approach to faith inclusion,
Yeah.
and the impact he's had. It's quite a story.
It really is. And, what's striking is how sources describe him. Uh, Recognized church leader around the world,
Right.
even one of the most important Catholic figures of the 21st century, that's significant.
Definitely.
And what's compelling, I think, is this mix. He's got this deep theological knowledge, but also this like real commitment to the poor, to justice.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll, peel back the layers. Family stuff, his rise in the Vatican,
Mm-hmm.
see how it all fits together.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. He was born Chito in the Philippines, June 21st, 1957.
Chito, yeah.
And his family background is kind of surprising given his focus later on. His grandfather was part of the Principalia.
Right, yeah, these were like the elite families under Spanish rule, descendants of the old nobility.
Wow, okay. But then his grandmother, she ran a small diner.
Yeah, exactly. Quite the contrast. She had to support the family after being affected by a bomb in World War II. So hardship was there too.
I see. So he grew up south of Manila, got a good education, St. Andrew's School.
Strong moral grounding there too.
And it was the priests there who influenced him. That's where the calling started.
Seems like it.
Yeah.
That's what the sources suggest. That early exposure really planted the seed for the priesthood. And if you connect that, his family's kind of mixed experience, those priests, it seems to have really anchored his commitment later on, advocating for people who are often overlooked.
Right. That makes sense.
He went to the Jesuit San Jose Seminary after that. And they're known for, well, rigorous academics, but also a big focus on social justice.
Okay, so that reinforced it.
Definitely seems like it shaped his path, laid the groundwork, you could say.
And he was clearly brilliant academically, bachelor's in philosophy with honors from Ateneo de Manila in 77.
Yep.
Then heads off to Washington, D.C. in 85, Catholic University of America for systematic theology,
Right.
and gets his doctorate with best honors in 91. That's impressive.
It really is. You get a sense of just the intellectual power there. And his doctoral thesis, it was on episcopal collegiality.
Okay, what's that exactly?
It's basically the idea Pope Paul VI championed, that the Pope shares authority with the bishops. It's not just top-down.
Ah, okay, collegiality, shared leadership.
Exactly. And his professor, Joseph Kamanchak, apparently said Tagle might have become one of Asia's best theologians if he hadn't decided to become bishop.
Wow, high praise.
Tells you something about his potential in pure theology.
A rapid ascent in the church hierarchy.
So after the PhD, he heads back to the Philippines, takes on different jobs. Rector of a school in Imus,
Yeah.
guiding future priests.
Right. So formative work. And apparently he quickly got known not just for being smart, but also for being, kind, a natural leader.
People liked him.
Yeah, seems so. And what's really striking is how fast the higher-ups noticed him. By 1997, he gets asked to join the International Theological Commission.
Okay, that sounds important.
It is. It advises the Vatican on theology. Big
Yeah.
deal. And the same year, he's an expert at the Synod for Asia.
So already operating at a high level.
Absolutely. Clearly on a fast track.
And the rise continues. Pope John Paul II makes him Bishop of Imus in 2001. And while he's there, people really admired his, the sources say, deep compassion, strong pastoral leadership, dedication to social justice.
So living out those values.
Yeah, and people mentioned how humble he was,
Yeah.
easy to talk to, which isn't always the case, right?
Not always, no.
Then, just 10 years later, 2011,
Mhm.
Pope Benedict XVI X8 makes him Archbishop of Manila.
Which is huge. One of the most pivotal roles in the whole church, especially in Asia. And looking back, his time as Archbishop really kicked off what sources call a new era for the Archdiocese, centered on change, acceptance, reaching out to the poor, the marginalized.
A different kind of focus.
Seems so. And the ascent just kept going. 1 year later, 2012, Pope Benedict makes him a cardinal.
Just 1 year after becoming Archbishop.
Yep. Incredibly fast. It really showed the Vatican saw his skills, his leadership, his, global influence growing.
Wow.
He was one of the youngest cardinals then, too. And that's when the talk started. Could he be Pope one day? Papa Beale, they call it.
Right, I remember that buzz.
Championing a radical welcome.
Okay, now this part I think is where things get really interesting. His leadership style, this dedication to welcoming everyone, showing kindness, especially those on the outside. He talked about this idea of radical welcome. What did that actually mean in practice?
No. Well, his vision was for a church that wasn't just about, strict doctrine, but one that was really open, friendly, engaged with people's actual lives and struggles.
Okay.
He believed everyone, and he specifically mentioned LGBTQ plus people, should be treated with respect, with decency.
But he still upheld traditional teachings on marriage.
He did, yeah. He affirmed the teachings, but the way he talked about it was different. The sources say a tone of pastoral care instead of condemnation.
The tone, that's key.
Very key, and very much in line with where Pope Francis was also trying to steer the church towards mercy, openness.
And he wasn't just vague about it. There was that interview, March 2015.
Yeah.
He said the church needed, more understanding and up-to-date language.
Right, when talking about gay people, single moms, divorced and remarried Catholics.
He basically admitted the church had used harsh words before, words that pushed people away.
Yeah, he acknowledged that. He said things like strong words made these groups feel like they didn't belong. Pretty direct. And this brings up a really important point he made. He cautioned against applying the same blanket rule to every situation, especially divorced and remarried Catholics. He said every case is different.
Okay. Nuance.
Exactly. Applying a same rule to all could be damaging, he warned. His message was clear. Church should be a safe place. Nobody should feel judged or uncomfortable there.
How did that go down?
Well, as you can imagine, it split opinion. Reform-minded Catholics, they loved it, praised his approach.
But the more conservative side.
They were skeptical. Some felt it was too lenient, maybe even undermining traditional teaching. It definitely sparked debate.
But Tagle stuck to his guns.
He did. He kept insisting the church's main job is to show Christ's love and mercy, especially, he said, to those who feel left out.
Global reach and modern engagement.
So his influence wasn't just in the Philippines. He got involved in bigger global issues, too. Poverty, climate change.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Migration, human rights. He really took an active role on the world stage, gained a lot of respect internationally for that.
And his work with Caritas Internationalis, that's the Vatican's big charity arm, right?
Exactly. He was president. And he really focused their work on the most vulnerable, hunger, economic injustice, the environment.
So very hands-on with global problems.
And his global stature, it was really cemented in 2019. Pope Francis appointed him prefect of the Congregation for the Evangelization of Peoples.
Okay. That sounds like another major Vatican job.
Huge. It basically puts him in charge of missionary work across most of Asia, Africa, Oceania, a massive responsibility.
So Francis clearly trusted him, saw him as
And a modern and world-minded leader, yeah. That appointment really signaled that.
He also seems pretty switched on about technology, social media, which isn't always the case with church leaders.
Not always, no. But Tagle seemed to get it. He led something called the Lazarus Project in 2017.
Lazarus Project.
Yeah, it was an Easter thing on social media. Use the hashtag #ResurrectLove. The goal was more inclusion, especially for marginalized groups, workers, homeless, LGBTQ plus folks.
Interesting. So using modern tools for his message.
Exactly. Uses Facebook, YouTube, tries to connect with younger people, people from all backgrounds, offers messages of hope, faith, but in a, accessible way. And what's kind of interesting is how people respond. His friendly, approachable style. It makes the church seem more real, as one source put it, especially for people who might feel distant from the usual rituals.
Right, breaks down barriers, maybe.
Could be. And he's also been a really strong voice on the environment. Environmental justice, climate change.
Citing Pope Francis's Laudato Si.
Yeah, frequently. Urging Catholics to protect the earth, emphasizing that idea that everything is connected.
Navigating the controversies.
Okay, but like most leaders, especially in such a huge institution, it wasn't all straightforward. There were challenges, criticisms too, right?
Oh, for sure. His path definitely had its bumps. For instance, when he was Archbishop of Manila, some people felt he got too involved in politics, partisan politics.
How so?
Well, he was one of the few really prominent church figures who spoke out against President Duterte's war on drugs.
Which was incredibly violent and controversial.
Exactly. Thousands killed without trial, so Tagle spoke against it. And this sparked a big debate. Human rights groups, many church supporters, they saw him taking a necessary moral stand. But some politicians, even some within the church hierarchy, thought it was too political, blurring that line between church and state.
Right. Could it damage the church's moral authority if it looks too political?
That was the argument from some quarters. It raised that classic question, where's the line for pastors? Spiritual guidance only, or do they have to speak out against injustice, even if it gets political?
A tough balance. There was also controversy around the Vatican's deal with China, wasn't there? Yeah. About appointing bishops.
Yes, a very contentious issue. Many critics felt the deal compromised the church's freedom in China.
And Tagle's position, or lack of one.
But that was the criticism. Many people expected him, given his profile, to be a stronger voice for religious freedom there. His relative public silence on it drew disappointment from some. And another area that came under scrutiny, how he handled allegations against clergy when he was Archbishop.
Okay, the abuse crisis touched everywhere.
Indeed. Some critics felt he wasn't forceful enough, that disciplinary action against accused priests was too slow.
Well, his supporters.
His supporters argued the claims were baseless or that processes were followed. But the perception for some critics was that the response wasn't maybe clear or quick enough to protect victims.
So questions about his leadership on that front, too.
It definitely raised questions for some about his leadership style and his commitment to, internal church reform.
And finally, does his generally progressive, open stance, does that cause friction internally with more conservative elements in the Vatican?
That's a question people definitely ask. Could his openness potentially alienate some powerful figures? And could that maybe affect his influence or even those papabile rumors?
So potential implications for his future standing.
It's certainly something observers consider, yeah. Navigating those internal dynamics is complex.
A bridge builder's legacy.
So when you step back and look at it all, what's the takeaway? Despite the challenges, the criticisms, his commitment to social justice, to the vulnerable, it seems pretty undeniable.
I think so. It's really cemented him as a major voice.
Yeah.
His leadership keeps pushing this vision of a church that's like deeply involved in both the spiritual and the humanitarian side. Healing, uplifting, speaking up for the forgotten.
A voice for the voiceless, in a way?
Yeah, you could say that. He really does seem like a symbol of maybe hope and renewal for many. His life, his work. They show how faith, kindness, service can make a difference. He's built bridges, hasn't he?
Bridges between?
Between tradition and modernity, between doctrine and mercy, between just believing something and actually doing something about it. Faith in action.
Mm-hmm.
And as the church keeps grappling with this complicated world, his approach,
yeah,
it does offer a path forward towards something maybe more just, more caring, more inclusive.
So as Cardinal Tagle continues his work inspiring people, here's something maybe for you, the listener, to think about. In our world today, with all its changes, its divisions, what kind of bridge building do we need most? Not just in religion, but everywhere in our lives.
Yeah, that's a good question. And if you're interested in learning more, we definitely encourage you to look up his work with Coitus Internationalis or check out some of his digital stuff online. See how that vision of a church for everyone is actually playing out.